Hey, missionaries, Coach Ben back again. Question: how many of you have heard the saying, communication is key? This saying obviously reigns true in our relationships with our spouses and family and friends, but is this key used consistently in communication with our supporters? In this challenging third session of the Modern Day Missions fundraising series, The Communication Gap, Rob Parker shares how missionaries can build stronger partnerships through intentional, authentic communication. He also explains why the biblical view of partnership matters, how to create a simple communication plan you can stick to, and how small, consistent touch points, like a short text or a quick email, can go a long way in showing love and appreciation to your supporters.
Rob, you've been a friend of Modern Day and myself for a handful of years now. It is great to have you on the set here at Modern Day Missions.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm glad to be here.
Absolutely. Rob Parker, he's been in full-time ministry since 2006. He's the founder of Prepare Ministries and has trained thousands of missionaries to raise their own financial support. So for this video today, we're going to be talking about closing the communication gap. But the reality is, Rob, is that quality, healthy communication can be a challenge for missionaries. And so what I want to know is, what have you found to help missionaries to navigate the communication challenges well?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Marvin, for me, it really starts with having a proper perspective and a healthy understanding about why you're even communicating. If you start off your relationship with a partner with something less than biblical partnership, you'll have something less than biblical partnership of a relationship, and you'll do non-biblical things to keep it going, which kind
Well
of
said.
wear on you and are exhausting and people don't want to do.
Yeah.
And so starting with a really authentic, real biblical partnership is super helpful. And from there, in a very general way, and I don't want to be vague here, but in a very general way, it's the first and second great commandment to love God and love people. Loving people well is really our life assignment.
Yes.
It doesn't mean you have to pastor them or counsel them or be super saint in their life. It just means to love well. And a big part of loving well is communication.
Yeah.
And I would say more than half of communication is listening well. So bridging that gap starts with having a healthy understanding of what real partnership is.
Okay.
A simplified way of saying it would be trying to maintain a non-biblical partnership relationship is hard.
Yeah.
There's too many hoops to jump through and too many, this is a secular term and I don't know what else to use here, but schmoozing,
Yeah.
and nobody likes that. And so we avoid it and we draw back and we don't do it. And then the drawing back creates crisis and urgency in our life that then we have to try to fix.
Yeah.
And so having a really healthy perspective on the front end is helpful. I think the other thing that's helpful then is actually having a strategy, schedule, and a plan for your communication. Most people do it on the fly as they're feeling it or they feel like they have time. And that you wind up navigating towards 2 or 3 partners and leaving a good portion of your team out of that loop. You don't mean to, but you kind of naturally gravitate where you find it easier or a little bit more camaraderie or something.
Sure.
And so the other thing is we wait until it's convenient, which happens, like for 10 minutes about once a month, and so right perspective, having a little bit of a strategy, and I would consider a schedule. Those are some of the things that if we take a look at it and put those in place, it becomes much easier to bridge that gap not be quite as overwhelmed, have better quality communication and and a good steadiness of it, a
Mhm.
consistency of it.
So you mentioned like communication pattern,
Hmm.
and what we want here for missionaries is we want clear, we want concise, we want compelling communication, right? I mean,
Hmm.
that's what we all want from missionaries to their partnership base.
Hmm.
And but you mentioned a communication pattern. So what does a communication pattern look like for missionaries?
Yeah, that's kind of what I mean when I say schedule.
Mm-hmm.
That is, I decided I didn't want anybody left out of the loop. That I didn't want to just navigate towards, people that were nice to me and avoid the people that maybe weren't as
Mm-hmm.
nice or, you know, whatever the reasons. I
Yeah.
just decided I have to write it down and reach out to everybody. So that's where it started. The other thing was I can't call every partner and talk to them for 20 or 30 minutes, five, six, seven times a year. I
Mm-hmm.
can't do it. And so I developed a pattern of understanding that part of my communication happens in a newsletter. Part of my communication can happen in a text.
Mm-hmm.
Part of my communication can happen with a postcard or maybe a card that I acknowledge a birthday or an anniversary or something with.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, part of it can be a phone call and part of it can be the face to face
Mm-hmm.
meeting that I have maybe once a year or every other year, depending on the location.
Yeah.
And so I got very diverse in my communication method, and all of those tools work together
Mm-hmm.
so that I have a quality connection with my team.
Yeah.
Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. It does.
I didn't put all my eggs in the newsletter basket or all of them in the face to face.
Right.
And so I have a pattern of frequent, short communications,
Mm-hmm.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mostly because I found that's what I could be faithful to.
Okay.
If I had to sit down Saturday and call all my partners, it doesn't matter whether I'm calling partners, yard work, watching a game. My attention span is only so long, and I'm like done.
Yeah.
And I can call for about an hour or so, and then I'm like so through.
Yeah.
And so I have these short, frequent patterns. For a long time, I don't do it so much now, Marvin, because I've just kind of worked into the rhythm. But I would have, besides my newsletter,
Mm-hmm.
I would have postcard, text, or excuse me, email, text, email, phone call,
Mm-hmm.
email, text, email, phone call.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the pattern that I had outside of the newsletter.
Gotcha.
And that made me constantly reach towards them or consistently reach towards them.
Mm-hmm.
I broke it down into smaller pieces
Yeah.
where I wasn't locked into anything for more than about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
With the exception of the phone call, it would be 15 to 20.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found it easier to be faithful if I had something laid out, I already knew what I was going to do. I'm going to do whoever's next on the list.
Yeah.
I know it's going to be an email, and
Mhm.
here's what I'm going to say.
Hmm.
It only takes me a couple minutes.
Yeah.
And so, in some ways, I reach towards my team almost every day,
Mm.
but it's only a small portion of my team,
Right.
and it's only for a couple minutes. But if I do that every day, just a couple minutes, by the end of the year, I
Mhm.
actually had the connection with my team that I wanted.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about, on this topic, as you were talking, what came to my mind is awareness of your type of relationship with your support team
Yeah.
and how on your support team you may have just an acquaintance,
Yeah.
who you know very little, all the way to your mother,
Yeah.
And so I guess my question is, and this is a little bit of off script, but I'd love to hear your thoughts here, is just being aware of the type of relationship that you have with a donor
Mhm.
or someone on your support team. And would it make sense to kind of mold your communication consistency and pattern and strategy based around what your relationship is
Yeah.
normally like with that person. Does that make sense?
It
Just
does.
the awareness of how do I normally relate with this person?
Right.
How are we normally in communication?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a great point, and certainly the answer is a bit nuanced,
Mm-hmm.
but for me, setting a communication pattern is really kind of my baseline. Okay.
Yeah.
The friendships that I had pre-existing, that we were really good friends before partnership, those have a way of maintaining that kind of rhythm and that kind of cycle and the way that we've always connected. Uh, my strategy and my plan for communication is really kind of a baseline so that my acquaintances are being properly connected with.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I kind of break the pattern with my closer friends,
Yeah. Yeah. I get it.
but it happens kind of organically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes.
But also, I moved away from my friends.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Which many missionaries do,
right.
because so many are international.
And so the normal pattern of hanging
Yeah.
out and getting coffee is kind of broken anyway, and you
Yes.
have to replace it with something.
Right.
But you're raising at such a good point. One of the things I want to make clear, Marvin, is I realize that what I'm about to say might be controversial to some,
Mm-hmm.
but I made it a real point to treat everybody on my team the same.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. For example, I don't have a gold partner, a silver partner, and a bronze partner. Okay.
Gotcha.
I don't. Excuse me. I don't. For one reason, I want to love well.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Yeah.
Number two, you're familiar with a passage that says something along the lines of, hey, when you're gathering for a meeting and that rich fella comes in
Yeah. Yeah.
and you set him up here
Yes.
and the lesser guy you set back there,
Yes.
you
Lord
don't-
doesn't enjoy that.
he doesn't enjoy that.
Yeah.
And for me, I don't acknowledge and give more face time and more personal time to someone based on income.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I want to make that clear.
Yeah.
I don't do that. Some relationships have a little bit more time spent in them, but it's usually the people I had more relationship with before we were ever partners.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's important right here to clarify that the reason I'm putting this emphasis on communication, it's really a couple things. Number one, there's a real co-laboring
Mm-hmm.
with the body of Christ. We've had conversations before where we've talked about goer and sender
Mm-hmm.
owning each of their parts, equally well and working together to achieve something.
Yes.
So to some degree, my newsletter is a board meeting,
Yeah.
or it's a quarterly update on what we've achieved together.
Mm-hmm.
If they're co-laboring, if they're being faithful to be good stewards and they're obeying the Lord, then I need to let them know what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Absolutely.
I also want to share with them ways that they can be praying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if my communication is real biblical partnership, keeping you aware
Mm-hmm.
of what we're accomplishing together, giving you credit and saying thank you, sharing with you areas that I need some prayer support or a way that you could come along. Undoubtedly, you can do a lot of that in a newsletter, but some of it you need to do by phone call
Right.
because it's just too much for a letter.
Right.
But then other times, just to show appreciation and gratitude, you can send a text.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting survey was done. This was done years ago, but a survey was done asking people who used to support missionaries, why did you stop?
Okay.
67% of the time, the answer was, I don't believe the missionary is grateful, or
Wow.
I don't believe they care about me.
Interesting.
Let me say it another way. 67% of the time that partnership was lost, it was easily avoidable
Easily avoidable.
by walking in the second great commandment
Yes. Yeah.
and having a plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wow.
I might sit down with a total stranger who's been recommended by a friend, and I might gain a partner.
Mm-hmm.
That stranger becomes a bit of an acquaintance. But in 10 years, that acquaintance shouldn't still be an acquaintance.
Right.
I can be intentional about
Yeah.
building that relationship.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Am I doing that because I want to keep your partnership? Well, I actually want to do it because the Lord's connected us and I want to love well.
Right. Yeah.
And I want to care about people.
Yeah.
And sometimes just saying, hey, I see you. I'm praying
Yes.
for you.
Yeah.
Or I hear what you're going through. Sometimes that's all it takes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, one quick story, Marvin. One morning I woke up. It was about 4 a.m. It was a season where I was starting my day by 6 o'clock. It was 4 a.m. And just immediately, this one particular guy keeps coming to mind. I wind up just praying for him off and on through the morning. Well, I'm in the office. It's probably 8 o'clock. And I sent him an email. And I said, hey, bro, the Lord just dropped you into mind. Been praying for you, calling out your name and your family before the Lord.
Yeah.
Asking him to draw near you, to comfort you and encourage you.
Hmm.
Appreciate you and all that you do.
Yeah.
Boom, immediately I got a response. And with short exchange, we're on the phone. And he said, his voice was kind of breaking up. And he said, hey, I was on your mind at 4 a.m. Yeah, I get up kind of early. And he said, you prayed for me off and on throughout the morning? Yeah. And I can hear him starting to cry on the other end.
Mm-hmm.
Just the fact that somebody thought of him and
Mm-hmm.
did that, and then followed it up with just an encouraging, like a 2-sentence text.
Yes. Huge.
Huge.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't have to cancel, the ministry outreach for the next 3 days to do that.
Right.
I was just one-liner prayers as I was getting ready and moving around on the commute, and I didn't take any time, and
Yeah.
it took me 30 seconds to type the message. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
yeah.
And so I found that those moments are so powerful
Yes.
to show appreciation, to show them that you're more to me than just a partner. I care
Mhm.
about you.
Yeah.
Acknowledging birthdays, following up on prayer requests.
Right.
I pay attention to their social media. It helps me keep track of what's going on in their life and when babies are born. And,
Mm-hmm.
because those are things that we live every day when we live in proximity with people.
Mm-hmm.
When you move away, you have to create that overlap,
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
and so I have to be intentional about that or it's lost.
Right.
Yeah.
Rob, you used the word intentional. And intentionality is key, but intentionality with spread over a large donor or support base
Mhm.
can take a lot of time.
Mhm.
And so I'm just curious, is there, an industry-wide standard,
Mhm.
or what is the wise counsel here on, a missionary family? What type of time should they spend focusing on fundraising / their support and donor base,
Right.
and
Right.
in their day-to-day, week-to-week, month-to-month, what type of time should they allot for that? I think that would be helpful for some to
Right.
know.
Right. Well, obviously it's going to vary a little bit based
Mhm.
on the proximity that you have to your partnership team and how many partners you have on your team.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, I'm not suggesting this. I'll talk more about this in a later session sometime, but I worked out a schedule where I could stay connected with 150 partners
Wow.
in less than 2 hours a week.
Do tell and share the world.
Well, Marvin, it's amazing. I just did it as an experiment. I did the experiment and it blossomed into 150 people within 2 hours. Okay.
Jeez. Yeah.
And here's what I meant. There was a time where I spent a lot of time in devotion, ministering to the Lord, prayer meetings, corporate prayer meetings, and would step out of that environment and into a training one. And I had about a 15-minute gap. And I'd come out of that prayer meeting and I would text one part. Sometimes they'd respond, sometimes they didn't. Well, I did that every day. Just taking that little transition window, one partner, you realize that's 365 partners a year
Yeah.
by taking 30 seconds in a transition. Well, I don't have 365 partners. So you know what it means.
Yes.
The 50 to 60 partners you do have, it's 5 or 6 texts a year walking from your office to the car.
Yes.
So I started taking advantage of what I call transitions. It's those
So
10 and
smart.
15 minute window that's often lost.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because the meeting took an hour and you had this booked and that teaching booked, but it's the transitions where we waste time.
Yeah.
And so in that little 15-minute transition, I just decided I'm going to text people.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't call because I could get pulled into something longer than
Right.
what I had gap for.
Yes.
So I just did text. Well, I started doing this more and more. I started researching a little bit, and I somehow stumbled across an article where it was talking about time. And I learned this. An average American in their adult life, by the time they die, they will spend 3.5 years waiting in line.
Oh my goodness. I believe it as someone who travels frequently.
Okay. Well, what if you decided that every time you're waiting in line,
Yes. Yeah.
you just decide to pray for, you name the topic, but for me, for many years, it was the unborn. Marvin, if we stood before the Lord, having spent 3.5 years of our life praying for the unborn, you would not have regret.
Right. Oh man, that is so good, Rob.
You're standing there anyway. You're kind of your
Yes.
own captive audience. You got 100 things running through your mind. Pick the person in front of you. Pray for them.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm in that transition between meetings and I shoot a text to a partner, I'm standing in line, I pray for my partner. I've already right there done so much in that relationship, and I've not even really scheduled any time to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what I wound up doing, because I'm a list guy and I like to write stuff down, I created an email list. I created a phone call list, and I created a text list. And all of them, all the names were listed alphabetically, and then I did a staggered start. And I would spend about 7 minutes a day doing the first name on that list on each list. Text, email, and then when it came to phone calls, I'd do phone calls twice a week. On Monday night and Thursday nights, I would usually make 1 or 2 calls. That's it. Okay? What this did for me is I had about 55 partners at the time. Everybody got a monthly newsletter. Everybody got 4 or 5 texts. Everybody got 4 or 5 emails. Everybody got a face-to-face meeting, and everybody got about 2 phone calls.
Wow. So the communication was spread out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And part of it was I did it because my attention span is small. Like when I sit down to write a newsletter, if I don't get it done in like 20 minutes, I'm like, flopping on the chair, just like, like
Sure. Yeah.
like a homeschool 9-year-old
Yeah.
that doesn't want to do it,
I understand.
And so I had to learn how to do things in a short window,
Yeah.
but I could do them freely.
Yeah.
Okay. But having that connection sometimes, and it really goes back to that right perspective. I cannot tell you how many missionaries I've talked to in coaching, training, and follow-up, where their communication is they're really trying to justify their existence as a missionary.
Yeah. Well said. Yes.
And they're actually not nearly as relational as they think they need to be. They think they have to be impressive. They have to show some kind of growth or some kind of... And it shocks many people to find out often in my ministry newsletter, it's not uncommon. I'm not even talking about ministry.
And people relate to humanity, just
Humanity.
the realness of what's going
Yeah.
on in your life.
Yeah. I don't do that every time, but I give them little glimpses that
Mhm.
way. Uh, I personally have never tried to be what I call super saint.
Mm-hmm.
That's got every theological question answered, that's here for you, da, 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 da. There's been times, I don't do it often, but there's been times I've contacted my team and I said, hey, we need you to stand with us.
Mm-hmm.
We are in a tough season. Things are hard. Vision's blurry.
Mm-hmm.
Resources are a little bit limited. Would you pray for us?
Yeah.
Now, I could do that much more than I do.
Mm-hmm.
I choose not to, not because of appearance, but I've been around people that just every time you talk to them, they got a prayer request of some need and it wears you out.
Yeah.
I don't want to put burdens on my friends all the time.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
there's times I'm like, hey, would you pray for us?
Yeah.
And so my communications were that way, or sometimes I would write newsletters based on the calendar that our organization had, whether it be children's camps or outreach or a conference that we were hosting. And I would talk about why,
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you have a right partnership and a right understanding of that relationship, gives you a liberty to talk and converse a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
Let's face it, Marvin, you're not getting your city saved every month.
Yes.
And some months, there's hardly much to show.
Absolutely.
If we're honest,
Yeah.
we'll hit some months where there's just not much to talk about. It's just
lean.
It's just the same old, same old. We're just grinding it out right now.
The mundane.
Yeah. Well, when I hit months like that, I would turn my attention to what was going on with my family or what's going on with you.
Yes.
Okay. So I think communication is overly difficult for missionaries because, one, they don't really understand what the communication should be.
Yes.
And it's hard to keep coming up with outstanding, miraculous, super spiritual stuff every time. Okay.
Yeah.
And they don't have a plan and they haven't set aside the time.
Gotcha.
Those things make it harder than it should.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and what I'm hearing, Rob, is there's got to be a prioritization. There has to be an intentionality. There has to be a plan that you can execute. That has to be part of it. Just like part of a missionary's life is outreach. You have to have a plan of communication that you can execute with your support base.
Right.
So and I see that, and then it's like, yes, missionaries listening, prioritize, be intentional with your support base, hit all of the different ways that you can communicate with them, and the patterns you're talking about. And one thing that came to my mind was just an example really from my family in receiving communication and newsletters from Missionary, because we support a number of them. Is there a place where we over communicate? Are we in someone's life too much? Are we putting ourselves in front of them too much? Mm-hmm. And I ask that because there was this one family specifically that would it seemed like, once a week we were getting some type of touch point from them. Mm-hmm. What's interesting about my personality, Rob, is that kind of endeared me to them because I like the fighter, someone who's like super proactive and they're going for it. And I saw that. And even though I wasn't reading everything or whatever, I saw like, man, this person's serious about this. Mm-hmm. And it meant something to me. And so what it did for me and my personality is it endeared me to them and like, if they're that committed to this, I'm going to be that committed to them. And I know that isn't everyone, but my question is there a place of over communicating where it's like, hey, maybe you need to dial it back? And is there a balance in there?
Oh yeah,
for sure. Sense? Yeah,
for sure. And it even varies a little bit on the person you're talking to.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I want to talk about this for a minute.
Sure. Yeah.
But I want to preface it with an article that I read. I need to find it because it was fascinating. Mm-hmm. And every time I talk about it, everybody goes, man, you share that article with me. I don't even know where it's at anymore. But what they did is they did some polling, some surveys, asked some questions. And they reached out to 4 different demographics. These were all people who were connected to missions in some way. They connected with boomers, uh, Gen Z, X, you know. And so basically it was like your retired folk, your 50 folk, your around 30 folk, and your youngsters.
Mm-hmm.
And the question was, what type of ministries do you support? How much do you support them? And what kind of communication do you want to receive back, and how often?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So they reached out to 4 different demographics. What kind of ministries do you support? How much communication do you need? What type do you need? What's your level of support? Interesting. Here's what they found. By far, the most generous group was the retirement age.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
In terms of their ability, their capability, their gifts were much more generous.
Hmm.
What types of ministries did they sow into? They sowed into frontier missions, evangelistic,
Yeah.
Bible
Yeah,
translation,
of course.
church planting.
Yep.
Okay. Next generation, very similar. Oh, by the way, the last thing with the retirement group, how often do you need to hear from them? Quarterly newsletter would be great.
Mm-hmm.
Just let us know that it's still working and update us every once in a while. And as long as we know you're doing it and it's working, we're good.
Yes.
Okay. Scaled down, next generation, a little bit less money, but not much, a little
Mhm.
bit less.
Mm-hmm.
Very similar ministries, mostly frontier, evangelistic, church
Yes.
planting, so forth. But here's where it got interesting. When it got down to like Gen Z
Mm-hmm.
and millennials,
Yes.
here's what happened. The dollar amount was smaller, but it was smaller proportionate to their ability. It was actually less generous.
Interesting.
Also, the ministry started becoming more social and a little bit less evangelistic. In other words, they were sowing into clean water and air projects
Mhm.
quite a bit more. When you got down to the youngest generation, it was almost exclusively social,
Wow.
very little giving at all,
Very interesting.
and wanted weekly digital updates.
Oh my goodness.
The demographic that wanted the most intense level of communication was also the least generous and the least evangelistic.
Wow.
So
Interesting.
I want to answer the question, but I want to put it in context.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have an unhealthy expectation, and I'm not going to try to accommodate them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
True story. I'll change her name, but when my wife and I sat down with her, and we sat down with Sally, before we could even get the ask out, she slides a check over to us. It's $200. She said, "Hey, I'll do that every month. Let's reevaluate in like 10 years."
Okay.
And she said, "I'm really low maintenance. I don't need a bunch of updates. I don't need a bunch of text. I don't need a bunch of phone calls. If you email me, I'm not going to email you back."
All right.
She goes, "If you're in town and you want to have lunch, I'll have lunch with you guys. But I'm pretty easy. I'm a giver. I'm locked in. You don't have to take care of me."
Great.
And I said, "Okay, can I tell you about what we're doing?" She said, "Sure, if you want to, but I'm in."
What?
And so we spent about 30 minutes telling her what we were doing, and she just got that glazed over look. She said, "I don't know what you're talking about, but I'm still in."
Yeah. Wow.
Well, I started texting and emailing. She wasn't kidding. She did not respond
Mm.
at all.
Mm-hmm.
We're making a trip to a city where she was at, and I called her. She didn't answer the phone, goes to an answering machine. And I said, "Hey, Sally, my wife Ron and I, we're going to be in town, and such and such day, we've got an opening. Thought maybe we could grab lunch." Immediately, she picks up the phone. She's actually even filtering the call.
She's a woman of her word.
Oh, yeah. And I got on the phone with her and she said, yeah, let's do lunch. And we wound up going to her house and hanging out with her and kids for a little while. But she doesn't need much, doesn't want much. I mean, and if you send her those like once a week's texts, she's
Yeah.
not responding
Yeah.
to them. Okay.
Yeah.
But here's my barometer.
Yeah.
Here's my matrix. Am I connecting enough with you and saying enough to you that you can't accuse me of not caring,
Right.
and you can't accuse me of ingratitude?
Yeah. Got it.
I need a level of communication,
Yes.
the quality of communication where you know
Yeah.
that I love you and that I'm grateful.
Yeah. Yeah.
For some people, it's almost kind of a wink and a wave from across the room and a thumbs up.
Yep.
Okay. Sally was that way.
Mm-hmm.
You still doing it? Yeah. Still working? Yeah. All right. No joke. And when I told you that we'll evaluate in 10 years, she did.
Yeah. I believe it.
I
I'm
forgot,
convinced.
I forgot all about it. And we were having a lunch. She goes, hey, you know, this is 10 years.
Yeah.
And I go, oh my gosh, that's right. And she goes, I'm in. Let's do another 10.
Oh,
All right.
easy.
Okay. Now I got another friend.
Yeah. Yeah. Pendulum swing.
When I called him, I immediately had to create an end to the phone call. Okay. So when I'd call him, I'd say, hey, David, I got about 12 minutes before my next meeting, but I want to call and see how you're doing. And he would take off and start monologuing. I never did this, but if you wanted to, you could have set the phone down and walked away and just come back and he'd still be going. You know what I mean?
Oh,
and
yeah.
he was fun. I love him, but it's just, that's what you're going to get. So I learned I had to create a hard stop.
Yeah.
And I would say it before at the start of the phone call. And when he'd pause a little bit to take a breath, I'd say, man, David, that's amazing. I wish we could talk longer. Such and such, da, 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 da. And he goes, oh, yeah, I totally understand. But see, he felt like we had a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But both those people got the same amount of phone calls.
Right.
Okay. For Sally, I did do a little bit less communication because I know she's just not going to respond to it. But my main thing is I wrote it down. I had a strategy. I'm not going to leave anybody out. I'm not going to choose favorites. I'm not going to acknowledge a dollar amount to communicate how much communication you're getting for me. And over a few years' time, I started to know patterns and responses, and I kind of found everybody's niche.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I found out they were almost all pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Slight
Yeah. I can see it.
nuances here and there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I get email communications from dear friends that I love. Dear, dear, dear ministry in Israel that I love. I get a communication with them every week, and I hardly ever read it. It's just, I have so many friends that want to send me an email. And Marvin, when they say, hey, Rob, can I send you an email? I'd say, nah. And they're like, oh, no, I really want to share with you. And I said, hey, I get that, but I'm not going to read it. I just have too many. And with all the traffic that comes at us, we got to create buffers, and we only let in what we really want.
Yeah.
And so I've selected a little bit a little bit more conservative approach, but opted for quality. And then those really rich one-liner text.
Yes.
And that seems to have worked pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm hearing all this, Rob, and I love it, and this closing the communication gap. But as I'm hearing it and I'm processing, I could see, just put myself in the missionary seat, and I could feel where maybe this would feel daunting or stressful, over just the redundancy of continuing it over time, and even if they're doing it very well and they have a good plan that they're executing. So just kind of closing this out on the communication gap, and specifically just kind of to focus on the missionary or the missionary couple, their family, to encourage them if they're in a place of being discouraged in the fundraising, the space, even if their finances are really good, but it's just the prioritization, the intentionality of keeping up with their support team. If they're stressed out, if they're discouraged or what have you, what would be maybe some of your just kind of parting encouragement to that missionary who's in that space with it right now, even if they're doing well?
Right. Um, again, that's a pretty nuanced answer.
Yeah.
And if I was in a classroom, I'd take 20 minutes to answer it
Sure.
because it's really critical.
Mm-hmm.
And there's quite a few mindsets that have to be approached.
Mm-hmm.
For example, I encounter people who think they are so introverted that they can't even just do a phone call.
Oh, yeah.
I say this with compassion. I say this with tenderness and mercy. Marvin, that's not true.
Yeah.
Nobody is so introverted you can't do a phone call.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, you've grown up in a texting generation and your phone calls are diminished compared to my generation,
Mm-hmm.
where we learned real phone call etiquette.
Right.
And there was a phone call culture and there was a courtesy
Mm-hmm.
about when you didn't call and how quick you return calls, and a lot of that's lost now.
Right.
But those were skills, not gifting.
Mm-hmm.
Skills can be learned.
Right.
Okay. Even if you're an extreme introvert, you can take 10 minutes to do a phone call. But here's the bigger challenge. If we're that introverted, how are you going to love well?
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to do it?
Yeah. Figuring that out.
Yeah.
How am I going to love them well?
Marvin, I'm sidestepping your question for just a little bit, but I've literally had people in training almost out of frustration just yell, "Rob, I don't want to talk to anybody that much." I said, then get out of ministry.
Mm.
You've chosen the wrong career.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
they're like, what? And I go, no, you need to love people.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't get into ministry to do phone calls. I said, well, then love people.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't see the difference.
Yeah.
The other part of that is this. Every job we have, whether it's marketplace, whether it's ministry, whether it's church, whether it's nations, whether it's marketing, sales, you name it, every job comes with a few things that you don't like doing.
No, I was thinking the same thing.
They need to be done.
Yes.
Marvin, if we started our own business, you have to take care of your client base or you're not going to make it.
That's exactly right.
Okay. If you're in the area of sales and you don't develop a relationship and confidence and trust in your client base, they're not going to buy from you.
Yes. It's true.
Okay. We will make financial commitments where we share in values, where we have confidence and trust.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to expect people to make a financial commitment, how are you going to sustain that commitment if they aren't hearing the values and you're not growing in trust and confidence?
Yeah. So good, Rob. So good.
Okay. Now, just to show you a little bit about what I'm talking about, I had a friend on my team for a long time. Well, actually, he wasn't on my team a long time. Very wealthy. If I told you what he did and what his job was, you'd understand what kind of wealth he has.
Mm-hmm.
He has the kind of wealth where he doesn't know how much wealth he has.
Right.
And the amount of time it takes him to count it, he earned another million,
Yes.
And for a long time, he didn't partner with me, which I totally get. He was totally locked into Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't in Africa.
That's right. Yeah.
But through a process of time, he jumped on, actually, it was a trip that I was making to Israel. And I'd sent out a letter and I needed like $3,500 and I already had like half of it. And he called me during a training. And we took a break and I got on the phone with him. And he said, hey, I'm going to send you 5,000 or 10,000. Why don't you help me make up my mind? Well, I don't suddenly grow the assignment because more money's dangling in front of me.
Mm.
I only need 3,500.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him what I'd already raised. I said, so if you share a $5,000 gift, this much would be left over. And I said, you could share that with our ministry, or I could sow it into the people that we're ministering to. And he said, okay, very good. I'll send you 5. I said, how would you like to share the surplus? Honest. This is what he said. you pray a whole lot more than I do. Why don't you decide? So I just shared it with some of the needy people that we ministered to on the trip. I got back from that trip and I wrote a thank you, and I went a little bit over the top. I went a little bit more than I normally do, but he had just started partnering with me, and I kind of went over the top a little bit. And I was actually in a phone call with him, and he cut me off and he said, "Hey, I have a role just like you have a role. I'm not more important than you. You're not more important than me. If you want to acknowledge the gift and say thank you, that's great. But you don't need to go over the top like this." And it kind of rebuked me.
Wow.
But I kind of fell into that little bit of, he's got a lot. You really got to show a lot of gratitude.
Yeah.
And he actually rebuked me. He said, "Hey, this is a partnership. You have your role. I have my role.
Yeah.
What I'm doing isn't that big a deal. What you're doing's not that big a deal. Why don't we just leave it at that?
Yeah.
You run in your lane, I'll run in mine." Okay. Now, he was a good friend. I mean, he turned out to be a good friend. But my point is this. Part of our life is loving people. Even if you say it's all about Jesus, well, here's what Jesus is about. He's about people.
That's right.
There's no way around being kind and loving people and affirming and encouraging, edifying. There's no way around that.
Yeah.
God has stirred the hearts of these 25, 30, 40, 50, 70 people. He's put them in your life. You can say a kind word. I had one missionary, somebody I trained, one of their partners was from way up north Minnesota, really remote. And that partner called him after about a year and said, "Do you realize our partnership is the most significant relationship of my life?" In other words, the connection that he had with that missionary, the occasional conversation, the encouraging word, the newsletter.
His closest friend.
He said the most significant spiritual relationship I have in my life.
My goodness. Yeah.
And we look at it as a burden, like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do this. We got the wrong perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jesus loves those people.
Yeah.
And sometimes, Marvin, you are the hands and the feet and the mouthpiece that Jesus wants to use at that moment.
Yeah.
And so I've just decided I'm going to spend my life. I mean, we are living sacrifices.
Yep. Loving people.
Loving people. And I'm telling you, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is a text.
Yeah.
You are loved and appreciated.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've sent that one many times. I sent one to a dear friend right now that's going through an unbelievably horrible, challenging season. And instead of writing him, or getting on the phone because he's just overwhelmed with stuff and conversation, no, I just wrote that simple message. You are loved and appreciated. And sometimes that's all that's needed.
Yeah.
Not month after month, year after year.
Yeah.
But that's powerful.
Right.
Brother, I prayed for you today.
I think this has been excellent content on this topic of closing the communication gap, and but I know you have more out there on this, and so some people want to do a deeper dive and get more content. So can you tell people who are listening or watching how they can get in contact or connection with you or what you're offering?
Yeah. In fact, if they went to fullyfundedmissionary.com and let's say they dove into our online training or even just purchased our training manual, I've got some sections in there about newsletter, communication, about a thank you pattern, and how and when. I've got a list of like 82 ways to say thank you.
Oh, perfect.
That's all part of the communication.
Yeah, perfect.
It's outlined in there. It doesn't have as much detail as what we shared here, but the key principles are listed in there. They can also write us an email on our webpage. They can reach out to us. Our webpage is prepare-ministries.org.
Okay.
and they can send us an email and ask questions, but I'm always going to connect them with those resources.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Rob, you're a good friend. You do a great work. We're so thankful for who you are and your role in the Great Commission.
Mhm.
And thank you for being here on the set at Modern Day Missions.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So appreciative.
Yeah.
I hope this session was meaningful to you, and just know that I and the Modern Day Missions team, we're praying for you as God reminds and reveals his many strategies to fundraise your ministry. To connect with Rob Parker, Prepare Ministries, or any additional resources mentioned in this series, please go to the description below or visit our resources tab on the main fundraising series page at modernday.org.